I will let you know that it is indeed a pleasure for me today to introduce you to Tim Ries. Tim is an instructional designer with a Center for Online and Continuing Education. And he is sharing with us some really excellent information about being able to develop collaborative activities for our online courses. At this point in the semester, we're looking back and reflecting on what worked for us and maybe a few things that didn't, and wanting to get started on the planning for our next semester. So I'm going to turn it over to Tim and let him share some of these really exciting ideas with you.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Judy, and welcome everybody. Good afternoon. I'm really excited to be hosting my first PD session for COSI. Our topic today, of course, is designing activities for online collaborative learning. I chose to explore this topic after having many conversations with faculty such as yourselves and hearing about your successes in this area, as well as some of your challenges. And I'm looking forward to hearing your ideas about this. And I hope that you take away some fresh ideas and perspectives on how you might approach this in the future. So what we're going to cover today, excuse me, is we're just going to talk about some of the benefits of collaboration and learning in general, and examine some considerations for designing online collaborative activities. We're going to take a look at some examples as well, and then share some tips and best practices for online collaborative activities. So at COSI, we kind of have this saying is that we are always trying to get to the why of things. We don't use tools or technologies just for the sake of using them. We really want to put student learning first. So, everything that we do, we, try to do with purpose. So why collaborative learning? Well, one reason is that, we know that it's supported by research. There's a lot of really good research out there that shows that learners demonstrate significantly higher learning gains in terms of knowledge retention and critical thinking when working collaboratively or working with teams or groups. It also increases their motivation to complete tasks and encourages them to interact with their peers. We also know that it builds important skills, skills like communication, written and oral skills, self-management and leadership skills. And those are important in their post-college lives as well. We also consider it because it meets national standards, and anybody who's worked with COSI before knows that we work with Quality Matters, which is a national standard for quality online learning. And in fact, one of the standards has to do with learner interaction with collaborative activities. So we always try to promote and kind of meet that standard. But we also know that when students drive their own learning, that they generally perform better and stay motivated. So I want to talk about a couple considerations when you're sort of planning your activities. One thing, and I always put this first, I think this is so important, is to set the stage for successful collaboration. And that's the idea of promoting positive interdependence. And that's just simply the notion that the success of the individual is tied to the success of the group, right? So one of the ways that we can promote that is perhaps through a team charter or a group contract. And that sort of documents and outlines their mutual goals, the processes they're going to follow, the roles each member will perform in the group, and also just outlines, their individual responsibilities. So you might consider that that's, a good way to create that sense of, all for one and one for all. We always, look to our course objectives. When you look at your objectives, you might consider how might a collaborative activity support this, or how might it sort of raise the level of critical thinking of your students. Always think about assessments And particularly with group work, we want to consider, what will your team actually produce? What are they going to create that's going to demonstrate to you that they're meeting your course objectives? Also think about some proven structures that you may already be familiar with, things like brainstorming, uh, the jigsaw structure of collaborative learning. You might be familiar with that. Team writing, peer review. All of these things are kind of like things that have been used in the classroom for a long time, but with some slight modifications, they can very easily be adapted to online activities. And then finally, the idea of group processing. You want to incorporate group processing so that the teams are reflecting upon, what they're doing right, what could be improved, and that sort of speaks to their, them evaluating their own learning as they go through the activity. So with that, I want to just pause for a second, and I would love to hear some of your ideas about, and particularly about what you do to set the stage for successful online collaboration in your courses. If you want to post some ideas in the Padlet, that would be great too. Some great comments here. Formative assessments, of course. Used for glossaries, excellent. Video discussion boards. We're going to talk a little bit about Flipgrid later. That was in regards to tools. So great ideas. Thank you for posting. So we're going to take a look at some examples of collaborative activities. Obviously we're collaborating via Padlet right now. That's going to be the sort of the main focus of the tool that we're going to look at today. Although I do want to point out is that most of these methods you could use different tools, and some tools might do things better than others. You'll have to sort of evaluate that. I'm working on Padlet today because I think that it's simple, it's easy to use, it's very intuitive for your students. It is free, sort of a limited free use. You have a limited number of Padlets, but it is free. It's exceptionally good for activities like brainstorming, resource gathering, and sharing. Um, I use it for something I call the modified jigsaw approach. I'll kind of show you that in a minute. And then the idea of scaffolding is to create a sequence of activities which help to sort of raise the level of learning of your students. So here's a couple of cool examples. Some of them, I just, found on, just by Googling, but there's some pretty good ideas here. This is just basic resource sharing. So this is a group similar to the one that we have today by an instructor. And basically, it's just a bit of a, grab bag of ideas, pictures, videos, shared resources. This is pretty good. I mean, it's also kind of brainstorming. And even though this is somewhat unstructured, this is still pretty good for students because, they can help make sort of their own connections to ideas and concepts simply by kind of brainstorming on, on an open board like this. It's an excellent tool for doing concept maps. Again, I'm sorry. I thought I heard somebody. Okay. This is another way that you can use Padlet for brainstorming. In this kind of board, you can actually connect ideas. Multiple students can kind of like, add their thoughts. They can connect them and group them together. So that's an important part of just sort of, analyzing a problem and helping to organize it in their mind. This is kind of an obvious one. Scientific classification works pretty well for that. So this is a good example of that. And I want to show you a little bit later on how you use these little connectors. It's a really valuable tool when you're collaborating and grouping ideas together. There's a type of board that's dedicated just to maps. And, this may or may not be relevant, certainly for, maybe history or geography class. You might be able to think of some other ways you can use this, but there's a type of board that's just for maps. And I thought this one was actually very well done So it's a map of all the seven wonders of the world. It's a little more of sort of a school exercise, but I think it might give you some ideas about how you could use, some sort of map uh, activity in your class. So it's very cool. And by the way, I'll show you this in a little bit. When you create a new board, you select from different types, and they have different layouts, um, and one of them is just devoted solely to maps. Another type of board which you can create or select when you create is the timeline. I kind of like this one as well. So students could collaborate on this, make their entries, organize their entries, as they develop them. This is pretty straightforward. It's, the Apollo missions in sequence. There could be any number of ways that you could use this. I'm interested in hearing some of your ideas. Now, if you want to do something a little bit more structured, this is kind of like a little bit more of kind of a set grid type of Padlet. And this is like a SWOT analysis for like a business course or a marketing course. So here, they're kind of restricted to making their entries, in this way that you've set it up. And this is how you can start to structure the activities that you want so that it's not just kind of a free for all. And that can be a little bit chaotic sometimes, is when you just open it up for anything. So structuring it will help you to kind of maintain a little bit better control over it. I got two more I want to show you. So this is what you might apply towards a group project. This is like a short project, one that might span just like, say, a week or so. But this is also that idea, it's like slightly modified jigsaw. So, the work is kind of divided amongst the team. They each take a particular topic or concept, they research that, and then they basically contribute it to their base team's board. If you were to take that further, they would also split out into expert groups and meet with other teams that specialize in their particular topic and refine it further, and then bring that back and share it and teach it to the rest of their team. So, so you can start thinking about how you would structure those activities to accomplish that. So it's pretty straightforward. This is kind of set up in a fairly organized, grid, if you will. Now, if you want to take it to the next level, you can do sort of like kind of a multi-tiered, or I call it maybe a scaffolded type of assignment. So this one is actually three parts. The first part is designed for a team or a group to sort of, establish a common understanding of a particular topic or subject. In this case, they're going to do some research. They're going to post some articles. They're going to post some definitions, and that creates sort of a baseline of knowledge about this topic. So here's activity two. In this case, what they're doing is they're sharing some of their own personal experiences and background, and comparing and contrasting some of their experiences with their teammates. And that's a good way to get them into that sort of higher level of thinking, right? Compare and contrast. They're not just making definitions, but they're actually doing some more analytical kind of activity here. And then finally, when they do the third part, they're actually kind of putting it all together. They're looking on a case study, and then they're, analyzing that case study, and they're basically collaborating on one sort of unified viewpoint or response to that case study. So, so those are some ideas about how you can get a little bit more structured and a little bit more, in depth with that.
And Tim, we have a couple of questions and a
Yeah.
response regarding grading with Padlet. Renee has asked about how to do the grading, and then Nancy has indicated that she has a rubric for it. So would both of you, either of you, like to open your mics and share with us?
Yeah, any thoughts on grading with Padlet? So that's a good point. And to my knowledge, I don't know of any sort of like kind of automatic grading inside of Padlet. But I would love to see if you have a rubric. If you could post it to the board, that would be great. I would love to see what you do for that. Um, we'll follow up with additional information about some grading. I think that that's a good thing to explore further, for sure. And Nancy, you said you have them share their Padlet um, through the discussion board forum. Okay, that's great.
Yeah, honestly, I've been using this tool for a while. Judy actually introduced it to me, and I use it for group projects for my graduate and undergrad classes, believe it or not, just to kind of change up the assessments. I have my grading rubric in my Canvas course, and I have my students share their Padlets through a discussion board forum, so that way we could do like a peer assessment. Um, later on where they get to evaluate each other and how effectively they're able to deliver the message. I teach health administration courses, so it focuses more on health policy and international healthcare systems. So that's the way I've used it, and it's been great, and it's a way for them to learn a new, online tool.
Excellent. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for this presentation. You're doing a great job.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. I appreciate that. That's great.
Hi, all. Nancy, thanks for that tip. And I know this fall I'm going to come and ask if I can meet with you one-on-one. You've had so many great ideas over the last year. But what I was asking specifically is I read somewhere in the Padlet tutorial, so I did get a trial account. And there was something about the privacy of student names. And if you required their names to show up, that their names had to be logged somehow in Padlet. They had to create their own Padlet account. Otherwise, you could not require the names and the email addresses to go through Padlet. Just have them contribute on your link. But then they would have to type their name, and I see a lot of examples you have on yours, Deliver Visuals, Tim, is that they would have to type their name. So I'm just wondering, I do other assignments where students have to type their names in, and sometimes they don't. So I was just wondering if that's an issue, the student names privacy, and if you're not doing if they don't have their own account, are you finding that it's hard to, you're getting some anonymous contributions that you can't grade?
Yeah, so that is a good point. I mean, I think you're touching on a few things there, mainly privacy. I know that there's a setting here, you might see my screen, where you can actually, I forgot exactly where it is, but you can make all the posts anonymous if you want. But then again, that creates the problem that you described, is that you actually want them to register so that you know who's making what contribution. So that's a good point. I have to think about that a little bit more. I think that there's some trade-offs there. I don't honestly know the best way to manage that, but I do know this is that if you display their names, there's other settings in the board which makes them entirely private. So in other words, you can make it so that only the people you invite to the board can participate. So the board itself would be closed off to the public. You can make it unsearchable so that it's not available on Google. So you can sort of control the privacy of the board that way, so that even if their names are displayed, it should still be, private. Does that help? Does that address what you're talking about?
Yes, Tim, thank you very much. And it does sound like when I read about it a few months ago, it was more private than it was a couple of years ago.
Yeah, that's
or the year before. Yeah. And Judy has a great comment in the chat. Perhaps you assign a number or require them to use initials or something, or we could have an avatar name, a stage name or something. So
yeah.
definite workarounds there.
I think that I might be using like my Google account or something when I registered. So it's picking up. I didn't put my name in there. I think it's picking that up from an account. So
yeah, it's picking it up from your Padlet account, because when I posted, you can see
Padlet
that
account.
Richard 43. That's my Padlet name. Yeah.
So a couple of cool features. I mean, it sounds like some of you are familiar with Padlet. I just wanted to point out some things. I mean, again, this is so super easy and intuitive, but there's three things that I like to point out. So, creating a post, super simple. All you do is double click, create a title, which is always in bold, and then you can put however much text that you want, that you want to put in there. You can upload, let me try that again. I'm going to just delete that. You can upload almost anything. So you can, and if you kind of see over here, wait, it might be getting a little bit. So you can pick files, you can pick documents, you can upload videos, links, research papers. So there's really almost no limit. And in fact, you can actually search, right within your post and find stuff, directly on the internet as well. There are some other really cool features now. Padlet has partnered with a variety of third-party resources that enable you to kind of like add these extensions and add-ons. So you can do Spotify, YouTube. There's drawing tools. You can do a screen recorder. If you were doing some sort of a training session, you could record the actions on your screen. And then, of course, you can take videos, which is an excellent way. Somebody had mentioned Flipgrid, which is an excellent video-based discussion tool, but you could actually do that here as well. So do explore some of these extensions. They're adding more every day. And then also don't forget too is that when you want to organize and connect your ideas, there's a certain type of board, which is that sort of one of the boards that's like the brainstorming board, and you can use that. Basically, one of the options. Oh, there it is. So connect to a post. Yeah. So this particular post was set up this way. So if you want to connect with somebody else's idea or post, it just sort of activates that feature, and then you can click on that one and connect them together, and it moves along with wherever you move those. So that's the basics for Padlet. Super easy to use. A lot of it is just super intuitive. But I would point out that if you're using this for an activity, it's always a good idea to do like a little tutorial for your students to get started. Not everybody has the same level of technical comfort and skills, so you very much want to prepare them for the activity. And I always put either a tutorial or some directions. That's an important part to just help them get started. All right, now I want to, since we have a little bit of time, I just want to talk about one thing. So this is sort of a little bit of a distraction, kind of a bonus slide, if you will. And you might be thinking, well, what is this, like a bait and switch or something like that? But in reality, we already have access to a lot of the tools that we need to do some pretty cool collaborative activities. And I call this slide a fresh look at discussion boards. And there's some ideas about things that you can do to sort of elevate your discussions to promote some more critical thinking. So we're all familiar with the standard prompt, right? Instructor prompt, student responses, responded to, or some variation on that. It's not bad. Tends to get a lot of work for you guys, especially if you're grading them, right? So you might also consider those that maybe the second post could be more to synthesize, compare, or evaluate the original post so that you can get to a little bit more critical thinking level. They could choose 3 of their classmates' solutions and describe the pros and cons of each. You can also encourage them to do mixed media. You can allow them to respond with images, PowerPoints, videos, concepts maps. They can even put, as you pointed out before, their Padlet board in there. So encourage them to explore mixed media in their responses. And then finally, which I'm just going to give you a little bit of a preview, you might have seen this before, but you can do a structured debate in discussion boards, which I was involved in one, and I thought it was pretty effective. And let me just show you briefly what that looks like. So a structured debate in a discussion board, the idea is that you split your teams into a supporting team and an opposing team. And those teams, they post an argument, and they use these labels at the beginning of their post, a label and a brief heading with the description underneath it. And they put a plus in front of it. So that's an argument. One of their team members can respond to it with an explanation, or perhaps they put some evidence, some research or an article that supports the argument. But the opposing team, they can actually post rebuttals. And inside of Canvas, of course, you can, if they're careful about responding, they can create sort of a nice nested, organized discussion board. They can amend their original, they can even retract, one of their responses. And just to give you a sense of what a real one looks like, and this was done, I think, in a Google Doc, but this is actually a little bit confusing. Let me show you this. So, this is kind of what it looks like in a different program. So you can have this sort of like structured, organized argument and debate. And it's just an idea. I was surprised at how easy students adapted to it, but it's a good way to make sure that the posts are they're intentional, they're focused, and that it's organized. So I thought I'd bring that up. And again, it's something that we use every day, but maybe by looking at it with fresh eyes, you might consider some ways to promote more collaborative behavior.
And Tim, I was going to make another suggestion on,
Yes,
on
please.
discussion boards. I have someone who used it as a peer review format. So she had her students post their initial paper prompt, and then had people respond to it and give suggestions, and then they posted again their revised one based on the suggestions from their peers. So it became a peer review process.
Yeah, great idea. A great way to look at it. So we don't really have time to touch base. There's so many tools out there. I mean, you guys have probably used many of them. I'm a big fan of Flipgrid. I think that many of you are familiar with that's, video-based discussion. Some great uses for that is introductions and team formation. But also, just as you would like a discussion board, it's good for role play, synthesize, compare, evaluate. Don't forget Google Apps, working on a group research paper that, really supports that jigsaw approach really very well. Group case studies, even creating a collaborative story might be a good idea for sharing, collaborating on a Google app. I'm also a fan of this program called Miro, which is, I kind of describe it as like a Padlet on steroids. It's really pretty amazing. Unfortunately, we don't have the time. We're going to maybe save that for a follow-up session, but it is also an online collaborative whiteboarding, but it does some quite sophisticated things in terms of visualization, wireframing. It's quite a powerful business tool as well as an educational tool. It even has real-time chat built into it. So explore those, and I'm going to show you where I'm going to share some resources about these that you can access later.
And Tim, while you're going to that, Nancy has said that she would be more than happy to share a couple of her Flipgrid ideas, and we'll let anybody else share if you have some other ideas that you would like to add in or post in the Padlet he's going to be sharing with us.
Thank you, Judy. So just as an idea, so what I use with Flipgrid, obviously I use it for my introductions for my students. So first week of classes, it's a great way for them to get to know each other. And I also use it in, together with Padlet. So they have this, a case study where they go through it, they create a Padlet wall where they are kind of going through how they would deal with this scenario regarding a healthcare system. And then I have them kind of take us through the Padlet wall through Flipgrid and provide responses to their classmates through Flipgrid on how they dealt with the issue at hand and how they felt like the best way would be to deal with it. And it works pretty well. I've been doing it for a little over a year now where I use them together. And what's great with Flipgrid is it has a screencast feature. So my students already have their Padlet on their screen of their computer. And when they start their Flipgrid, they could just kind of turn on that feature and take us through the case study and kind of how their, their suggestions in dealing with the concerns that are noted in the case study. So, that's another way to do it. But Flipgrid is a lot of fun. If you can integrate it in Canvas, everything's graded right there. You can link your Padlet to your Flipgrid. So, right there with the student's video, there will actually be, they'll attach the link to their Padlet wall. So for me, when it comes to grading, I'll actually set it up as 2 assignments, but everything is right there in Canvas. And once you get used to it, it's pretty easy to use. But my students they love it. They're able to record from their cell phone. It could be from a laptop. Yeah, so that's kind of my.
That's fantastic. I love how you sort of use those both together to kind of, again, sort of elevate that learning. I do know too, you mentioned integration. I do know that there is an Padlet can be integrated into LMSs. I don't know that we have the sort of like the tool installed, but that would offer some great possibilities to have it integrated right into Canvas as well. So maybe I'll check with OIT and see where they're at with that.
Yeah, that would be great, because with Flipgrid, I actually integrate the app within my course. I've never looked in Padlet. That's a great idea.
Yeah, that would be great. Would be great. Any other ideas about collaborative learning approaches or designs? And this is great. These are just great ideas.
And Renee has some rather interesting uses, the ways that she uses Google Apps.
Hi again, everyone. And this relates to the project-based learning and the question in the Padlet that Tim posed, the question STEM. So what I do with Google Apps is lots of things, first of all, but I use it to share information with my students, but I get them working on it very early on, first and second week of class. And I have them start out working on it individually and then learning how to share their documents with me. And so I build up to this comfort level with Google Docs for multiple. I have Word documents where they have to create a document to share with me in the beginning to tell me whether I can send them certain kinds of messages and do they have concerns about the course, kind of a success survey. And then I'll do something that's doesn't have any academic content, just has introductory, it's just an introductory assignment. And then during the course, I will assign individual grades and individual assessments that will then use the Google Docs for specific tasks, such as creating a flow chart in Google Drawings, or creating Google Slides to explain. I teach information systems, so explain internal controls in information systems. I have them do their slides more like an infographic rather than your classic, 6 bullet points across, 6 bullet points down and 6 words across. So I get them into that multimedia mode. And then I bring it all together, and then they have a team project at the end using all of those things they've learned along the way. So it's not a surprise at the end. So they're comfortable sharing, they're comfortable with the Google apps themselves. They're comfortable with, then I add Screencastify throughout the term on that as well. So my fully online students present their work from Google Apps, but they record it in Screencastify, which is integrated in Google, and does have FERPA protections. They are got HIPAA and FERPA. And I just think Google Apps, there's certainly a learning curve at first with the sharing, but once students get comfortable, it's second nature. And if you don't mind, I just saw something come to me from the chat. Do you use links, or is there a better way? David, I'm glad you asked that question, because I have a caution. Google Canvas does have an integration with Google, and I did try it, I believe in the beginning of the fall or beginning of the spring, and it has some great limitations. First of all, you can't use it with Google Groups. So the whole idea of collaborative learning, they can collaborate in the Google Doc, but then you can't attach the Google Doc to a Google group, a Canvas group, so that you can have all those convenient grouping and grading features in Canvas.
Oh, wow.
So there is an LMS integration. I've been reading over the last year that Google's trying to improve it, but for right now, I would say do not use the integration. Again, I've used it as early as January, as recent as January. And I'll have to remember there was two major things. One was the groups, and I'm trying to think of the other major reason, David. It was something big. It was a showstopper. And I had to actually change the assignment and reopen links. So I'll think about what that is, but I can't remember what it was, but it was a showstopper. So I do just go through
Access
posting the links.
to your Google Drive.
Yes, that was, thank you, Judy, because Judy and I talked about it. Yeah, it does access your own Google Drive, which is unsettling at first because
Yeah.
you're seeing everything on there. But ultimately, I did test it, and the students do only see what you shared. But I'm trying to remember, it had to do Google. When you do the LMS integration, it creates this thing that you'd think would save time, and it takes the Google Doc, your Google Doc, and puts an extra button on it at the top right for submitting directly to Canvas. So seems like an awesome idea, but some students couldn't click that button, I think depending on what device they were using. And if they couldn't click the button, there was no workaround. So once you created that document and linked it through the LMS, you couldn't just give them the regular Google sharing link and let them go off and do it themselves. I actually had to create two parallel assignments. The students that
Right.
were able to use that to the LMS submit right from Google Docs, and the students that didn't. There was no workaround. They couldn't get to that document any
And I
other
think,
way. So I had to create two documents, two whole assignments. Then of course you can imagine grading. I had to merge the columns in the grade book. So it was a showstopper.
I think it has something to do with that. If it's integrated, it tries to use their FAU email to create an account, and they may already have a Google Docs account or a Google account, right? So is that maybe why there was like two different documents?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up too, because that would be the other caution. So
Yeah.
the LMS integration to me was a showstopper, but the other, when you do just use regular Google Docs for collaboration through the drive,
Right.
just be very insistent and repeated about making sure every assignment you tell them to use their FAU Google account to
I
open.
got you. I got you.
Because what'll happen is they'll create a assignment on their Gmail drive,
Right.
and you can still share it, but then the sharing gets a little bit some can get in the way, and then when they're not in FAU, then they keep trying to open documents that are FAU privately
Exactly.
shared, and they're in their personal. So you've got to get all students right at the beginning, say, when you think Google, think FAU login, and close everything else every single time for my class.
I
So
got
you
you.
need to get that pattern, that habit.
Great advice. Boy, that's really good advice.
Yeah, David, that wasn't what kept the submit button when working. And I did have students get in Zoom with me. So I don't fully know why the submit button wouldn't work for some students. And we did pursue that, which login are you using? And I couldn't come up with a solution, which is why I stopped using it. But I still use the regular Google with the links. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you so much. That's great. That's really good to know. So I think we're sort of coming to the end. Go ahead and continue to post to the Padlet any other ideas or tools that you've used. There's some really good ideas there. I'm going to leave that up for you guys. Just to kind of wrap it up, a few tips, and this is somewhat random. And again, you guys have been, you know, uh, promoting some tips, so feel free to jump in. But one thing that you might consider is encourage diverse groups. Now, usually we let students kind of form their own groups, but I was involved in an activity where the instructor actually did a survey at the beginning, and they paired up groups with some highly experienced people, with some not so experienced people, people from different industries and backgrounds. And there's some pretty good evidence that actually serves to improve learning. So diverse groups can really enhance the experience. We already talked about these multiple steps and activities that promote scaffolding. And Renee, I think yours would describe that perfectly. Remember too that with online activities, when it's fully asynchronous, you really need to provide detailed instructions and support. Even the slightest nuances can be interpreted completely different ways. One student might interpret it one way, so you really have to test that. Is making sure that your steps and your instructions are very, very clearly articulated. And I would say that, observe and support often. You want to be sort of ultimately the moderator and step in as students do need support and help, because, sometimes they can get off track. Don't forget about that group processing. It's so important for them to reflect on their own work, on what they're doing right, how they can improve it. That's an ongoing thing that can go throughout a project. And then finally, I always say this, embrace the chaos. Sometimes these things just don't turn out like you expect, especially when you have some of these tools. I did an activity where, we had, I had people linking, using that linking tool to link arrows to boxes. And I was thinking, well, this is going to be great. I'm going to see all these great relationships. It was a mess. It was a complete disaster. There was a gazillion arrows going everywhere. I'll show it to you in a minute, but sometimes you can always make revisions and fix those things, but sometimes the chaos is, students still make their own connections, and some interesting things can happen that may not have happened otherwise. So that's the only thing you do is trial and error with that. And with that, I think we're pretty much right on time or right out of time. I thank you so much. I learned so much from this session from you guys. I hope you found it useful. I do want to point out one thing is I've created another board for us. And this is I'm going to put all of the materials that we discussed, the follow-up materials to this presentation on this board. And I'm going to leave this open and invite you to it. And if you guys want to share more ideas and post things, this can be just sort of an all-purpose kind of job aid for resources for helping develop collaborative learning activities. So with that, I thank you so much, and I really appreciate your contribution today.
And Tim, we thank you and appreciate you tremendously. This has been really wonderfully exciting. Thank you, Tim.
All right. Well, thank you.